The dust storm came fast. Winds howled across the dry red desert, throwing sand into the sky like waves in the ocean. Elias pulled his scarf tighter around his face and narrowed his eyes. He had crossed this border zone many times before, but today felt different. His boots crunched against cracked earth, his rifle hanging on his back, and the wind carried strange sounds like voices. Faint and broken, he paused near a broken shuttle piece half buried in sand. The metal was old and rusted, its paint scorched by sun and war. Then he saw something, a small shape moving slowly in the storm. At first, he thought it was a wild animal crawling through the dust. But as he moved closer, he saw it was a child. The figure collapsed near the wreckage. Elias rushed forward, heart pounding. He dropped to his knees beside her, a tiny alien girl. Her skin was pale purple, almost gray from the cold. Her arms thin like sticks, and her eyes wide and glowing. She clutched a small metal chip in her hand and said nothing. "Hey," Elias said, gently. Pulling off his glove to check her pulse, she flinched, but didn't run. Her lips moved slowly. Barely a whisper, "Can I stay with you?" she asked, voice dry and cracked. "My mom?" "She died today." Elias froze. He had seen pain before, but never like this. This wasn't a soldier or refugee. This was a child alone, afraid. Half-starved, and speaking in the softest voice he had ever heard. "What's your name?" he asked. She held the chip closer to her chest and whispered, "Nira." The storm roared louder behind them, the wind pushing harder. Elias looked around. This place wasn't safe. Not even for a minute. Without another word, he lifted Nira. Gently in his arms, she was lighter than she should be. Like a feather, she didn't resist. She just held on tightly. Hiding her face in his shoulder, Elias walked quickly, making his way toward the hills beneath them. Hidden deep inside the rocks was an old shelter he had built years ago, back when the border was still safe and traders passed freely. Now it was abandoned land, watched only by drones and slavers. The entrance was a narrow tunnel covered by fake rocks and hidden sensors. He reached it and punched in the code. The door opened with a hiss, and he stepped inside with Nira still in his arms. Warm lights flickered on, revealing old shelves, crates, water tanks, and dusty tools. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. It was safe. Elias laid her down on a bed made of cloth and cushions. He offered her water, and she drank with both hands. Shaking, he found an old emergency ration and handed it to her. She stared at it like she didn't understand what food was anymore. Then began to eat slowly, one bite at a time, as she ate. Elias sat across from her, watching, thinking. He should report this, he told himself. There were rules, protocols for alien miners in human zones. But something about Nira's face stopped him. She had that look, the same look he had seen once in a war camp, a look that said, "Don't leave me." He finally spoke. "Where was your mother?" Nira swallowed hard, her voice still soft. "They chased us. My mother told me to run, so I did. I hid in the sand, but when I came back, she was gone." Her hands clenched the chip tightly. She said, "Someone will help me." Elias leaned forward. "What's that in your hand?" Nira looked at it, then slowly handed it to him. It was a small data chip, cracked at the edges, but still readable. He placed it into a reader static. Then a voice, "Nira." The voice said, it was a woman's voice, kind and tired. "If you're hearing this, I'm probably not with you anymore." Elias looked at Nira, whose eyes filled with tears. The voice continued, "Please, whoever finds her, please help her. Protect her. She's more important than she knows." The message cut off suddenly. Elias sat in silence, the chip still warm in his hand. He looked at the girl across from him, shivering, eyes wide, skin bruised and dirty, and yet there was something strong in her, something unbroken. "I'll keep you safe." Elias said softly. You can stay here tonight. Nira's voice came again, barely a whisper. Just tonight. Elias looked away for a moment, unsure of what he was feeling. The storm outside still roared, but in here, in this quiet shelter, a new storm had begun inside his heart. He looked back at her and nodded slowly. We'll see, he said. But deep down, a small voice inside him already knew the answer. She wasn't going anywhere, not if he could help it. Asterisk, the storm outside didn't stop for 2 days. It howled like a wounded beast, shaking the bunker's metal walls. But inside, the silence between Elias and Nira was soft and still. He gave her warm soup from a ration pack. She sat on the bed, legs crossed, quietly eating, as if every spoonful was precious. Elias didn't ask many questions. He could see she was still afraid, still waiting to be thrown out. But he had no plan of doing that, not yet. Not while the storm raged and her eyes still looked like they held too many tears. On the third day, she spoke more. My mother's name was Selah, Nira said, holding the old chip between her fingers. She used to sing. Even when we had nothing, she sang. Her voice broke a little, but she smiled. Sometimes. She told me stories about the stars. Not the real ones. The story kind. Elias listened, leaning back on his old chair. He hadn't heard anyone talk like that in years. The war had taken most of the joy from the galaxy. Even humans didn't tell stories anymore. Now, there was only work, survival, and cold silence. You ever hear Earth stories? Elias asked. Nira shook her head. Only that humans came from a blue place, full of trees. That's true, Elias said. I saw it once. Long ago. Nira looked up with surprise. Really? Elias nodded. It's the only place I ever saw birds that sang louder than the wind. There was a long pause. Then Nira whispered, Do you think she's in the stars now? Elias looked at her for a moment, then said, Yeah, I do. Nira nodded slowly, holding her small knees close. Then I'll look up for her, every night. She said. That night, Elias checked the perimeter scanner. A red light blinked brief, fast, then gone. Something or someone had passed within range. He didn't tell Nira. Not yet. Instead, he tightened the security locks, dimmed the lights, made sure his rifle was fully charged, just in case. The next morning, Nira was drawing with a piece of old charcoal on the floor. She drew circles, stars, and stick figures holding hands. She had drawn herself and Elias side by side, with a small home above them. Elias looked at it and smiled, but said nothing. Later, she asked, Why do you live alone? He paused, then said, Because I got tired of losing people. Nira didn't say anything to that, but her small hand touched his arm. Just once, then pulled back quickly. That touch said more than words ever could. That night, something changed. Elias woke to a strange sound, a quiet metal ping near the vent. He grabbed his rifle and moved toward the noise. Nira woke up too, her eyes wide in the darkness. Stay behind me, Elias whispered, raising his weapon. He reached the back room, near the air ducts. There was a small round object lying on the ground, silver, with blinking lights. It was a scanner dart, used by slavers to locate life forms hiding underground. Elias picked it up slowly, his heart sinking. Someone had found them, or was at least looking for something. And it wasn't animals. He turned to Nira. You've seen these before? She nodded quickly, fear growing in her face. They used them? The night they found my mom, Elias cursed under his breath. They didn't have long. Maybe a day before a full patrol arrived, he went into the storage room and pulled out emergency bags, packed gear, rations, and weapons. Nira followed him silently, her eyes watching his every move. Are we leaving? She asked. Elias stopped and looked at her. We might have to, he said. But I like it here. She whispered, voice cracking again. "It's the only place I've felt safe." "I know," he said softly, "but safety doesn't last forever. Not in places like this." He knelt in front of her. "I promised I'd keep you safe, and I will, but we might have to run again." She stared at him for a moment, then suddenly wrapped her small arms around his chest. "Please don't leave me," she said. Elias froze, then gently held her back. "I'm not leaving you," he whispered. "Not ever." The scanner buzzed again from outside. Louder this time, Elias turned off the lights and motioned for Nira. To crawl under the supply cabinet, she did, silent and fast, hiding like she had done before in the desert. Elias moved to the door, rifle ready, breath steady. They both waited in the dark, hearts pounding above them. Faint footsteps echoed metal. Boots on rock, whoever was outside. They were close, too close, and now the real danger had begun. The footsteps above faded slowly. For hours, Elias and Nira didn't move. The scanner outside had gone silent, but the fear it left behind stayed in the air like smoke. When the first light of the next day reached through the bunker's cracks, Elias finally opened the hatch and scanned the area. Nothing on radar, no drones, no boots in the sand. Still, he knew this was only the beginning. Slavers had picked up something, and they would be back, inside. Nira sat quietly on the bed, still hugging her knees. She hadn't spoken since the night before. Her small hands clutched the old data chip again, like it was the last piece of her mother she had. Elias watched her for a long time, then finally said, "Let's hear what she had to say again." Nira looked up, her eyes red, and nodded once. Elias placed the chip back into the reader. The voice of Selah, Nira's mother, returned, soft, warm, and full of sorrow. "If you're hearing this, Nira," the voice said, "then I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry. I tried to keep you hidden, away from those who would use you or hurt you. You're special in ways I never told you." Elias raised an eyebrow at that line. Nira tilted her head, listening closely. "I didn't want you to carry the burden," Selah continued. "But now, if I'm gone, you need to know you are the last living hybrid of the Ellerin and humans." Elias stood frozen. Nira blinked slowly, like the words didn't fully reach her yet. "I was part of Project Harmony," Selah's voice explained. "A secret experiment to blend a species. Your father was human, a soldier who died before you were born. You, Nira, are the only one who survived. They hunted the others." Elias sat down, hard, as the voice ended. The chip hissed, then powered off completely. Nira looked at him and whispered, "What does it mean?" "Hybrid." Elias sighed, rubbing his forehead. "It means your blood is human and Ellerin both," he said. "You're something new, something powerful. Is that why they want me?" She asked. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly why." She went quiet again. But this time her expression had changed. Less fear, more confusion. She wasn't just a lost child anymore. She was the key to something big and dangerous. Later that day, Elias pulled out an old holomap from his storage crate. He marked their location and the nearest human settlement, Newcaster, a place that refused to bow to slavers or the council, but it was far, across 2 wastelands and 1 toxic river. Nira stood beside him, still staring at the chip in her hand. "If I go there, will I be safe?" she asked. Elias looked at her and said, "Yes, but we'll have to be careful." Very careful. That night, Nira had a nightmare. She cried out in her sleep, calling her mother's name. Elias came to her side, gently waking her. Her small hands clung to his shirt, and she asked, half asleep, "Why did she leave me?" He didn't know what to say, so he just sat there, letting her hold on to him until she fell back to sleep. In that moment, he realized something had changed in him too. He wasn't just helping a lost girl anymore. He was protecting someone. He now cared deeply about the next morning. Elias found a small metal box hidden under the bunk where Nira had slept. He opened it and found a memory pendant, something rare and illegal. It held DNA data, encrypted coordinates, and a voice lock. He handed it to Nira. "What's this?" she asked. "I think it's your mother's last real gift," Elias said. "Try speaking your name into it." Nira leaned close and whispered, "Nira Selah." The device blinked green and opened, revealing a soft blue glow, a small projection. Appeared a star map and a flashing location deep in Ellerin space. Then a final voice message, "My Nira, if you've opened this, then it means you're alive and that gives me hope. This place, it's your true home. There, you will find answers, family, and maybe peace." Elias stared at the map. Then at Nira, she whispered, "I don't want peace if it means I have to go alone." "You won't," he said firmly. "We'll get you there, one step at a time." Outside, a new storm was forming. But inside the bunker, for the first time since it all began, there was a direction. Not just survival purpose. They weren't running anymore. They were heading toward something, and Elias knew deep inside that protecting Nira wasn't just a mission, it was now his life. The wind outside had changed. It wasn't just a storm anymore, smelled like fuel and iron. Elias stood by the hidden hatch, holding his old field binoculars. Across the ridge, he spotted a black transport vessel landed quietly in the sand. Its shape was too clean, too sharp, and it carried a mark he recognized, a red claw within a circle. Slavers, he turned back into the bunker and sealed the hatch. Nira was packing her small things into a cloth bag, her chip, her drawing, the pendant from her mother. She didn't speak, but her hands moved quickly, like she knew what was coming. "We have to go soon," Elias said. "They've found us again." Nira looked up, her face calm but pale. "Are you scared?" she asked. Elias didn't answer right away. "I'm not scared for me," he said. "I'm scared for you." That night, the wind was quiet for the first time in days, but the silence felt heavier. Like the desert was holding its breath. Elias had placed tripwire sensors around the bunker's entrance. He double-checked his rifle, loaded every energy cell he had, and locked the front control panel. Nira sat in the corner, watching. "I can help," she said softly. "You'll help by staying safe," Elias replied. "But I'm not weak." She whispered, "I don't want to hide again." Elias knelt in front of her. "You're strong." "I know," he said. "But strength also means knowing when to trust someone." She looked into his eyes, then nodded slowly. Suddenly, a red light blinked on the far wall. The outer tripwire had been triggered. Elias grabbed his rifle and pressed Nira gently toward the escape tunnel hatch under the supply floor. "Go inside. Wait for me," he said firmly. "I don't want to leave you." She whispered, "You won't," he promised. "I just need to slow them down." As Nira crawled into the tunnel and closed the hatch, Elias moved to the front, while he turned off all the lights and switched to infrared vision. The scanner showed 3 heat signatures to walking. 1 crawling. They were moving slow, like hunters, careful. Listening, a soft thud came from the side panels. Someone testing the wall. Elias pressed a button, activating an old defense turret hidden above the door. With a hiss, it rotated and locked onto the movement. He waited, heart steady, finger on the trigger. Then, a voice outside shouted, "We know you're in there. Human, hand over the hybrid girl, and we'll leave you alive." Elias didn't respond. He knew that was a lie. Slavers didn't leave anyone alive. He waited until one of them stepped closer, then fired a warning shot from the turret. The energy blast lit the sand in blue light, burning the edge of a shadow. The figures scattered, one of them yelling in pain. Elias switched positions, moving through the side tunnel inside the bunker. He had built it long ago in case of escape or surprise attack. At the back wall, he found another heat signature. One of the slavers had found the old ventilation shaft. Too close to the tunnel where Nero was hiding, Elias climbed the ladder quietly, then pulled out a stun grenade from his belt. He counted to 3, pulled the pin, and tossed it into the shaft. A loud flash and crack echoed through the bunker. The body fell with a heavy thud, unmoving. Elias didn't wait. He returned to the main room. Checked the monitor, 2 more signals. Both retreating. The turret had scared them, but not enough. They would come back. Maybe with more men, maybe with air support. He opened the floor hatch and found Nira, her small hands gripping the ladder. "Are they gone?" she asked. "For now," Elias said, helping her up, "but they'll return." "I don't want to keep running," she said, voice shaking. "I know," he whispered. "But running is how we survive for now." Elias gave her a small energy. Packed to eat and packed the last of the supplies. They had to leave before sunrise, before the slavers came back with something bigger. Nira pulled her hood up and clutched her pendant close to her heart. "I miss her," she said, tears filling her eyes again. "I know," Elias said gently. Placing a hand on her shoulder, "She gave you everything she could. Now it's my turn." They stepped out of the bunker one last time. The stars above were clear, sharp, and cold behind them. The place that had protected them now stood empty and silent. But ahead of them was a journey toward New Castor. And maybe, just maybe, toward the hope her mother had hidden in the stars. The desert behind them was nothing but silence now. Elias and Nira walked under a pale morning sky, where stars still faintly glowed. He carried a backpack full of old tech, food packs, water filters, and his rifle. Nira walked beside him, her small legs moving quickly to keep up. She wore a thick, patched cloak Elias had given her, and her hood covered most of her face. They had one goal now: reach New Castor, a hidden human settlement built deep in the rocks beyond the toxic river. It was known as a place that welcomed refugees, hybrids, and broken people. But it was far, and the way there was full of danger. By noon, the sun had turned harsh. They stopped near an old wrecked transport ship resting on its side. Nira crawled into the shadow, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Is New Castor really safe?" she asked, her voice tired. Elias nodded, sitting beside her. "It's the last place where humans aren't afraid to protect what's right." They shared a water ration, passing it carefully between them. As they rested, Nira pulled the pendant from her cloak and held it against her heart. "Do you think she meant for me to go there?" Elias looked at her, then nodded again. "Your mother left you a map, not just to a place, but to a future." Nira didn't answer, but her grip on the pendant tightened later that day. They passed into a broken canyon where twisted machines and shattered armor lay half-buried. Old warfield, silent now, but still haunted. Nira touched one of the helmets on the ground. "Were they human?" "Yeah," Elias said softly. "They fought here long before you were born." As the sun dropped lower, they found a cave high on a ridge and climbed inside. Elias set up a motion sensor near the entrance. While Nira explored the small cave walls with wide eyes, she smiled for the first time in days when she found glowing stones buried in the cracks. "Like stars," she whispered. Elias watched her and smiled too. That night, she sat beside the small thermal lamp. Her voice was soft but steady. "My mom said that one day, the stars wouldn't matter as much as the people you see beside you." Elias looked up from his bag. "She was right," he said. "Stars are cold, but people, they make the warmth." They ate together, sharing dry food and a story or two. Nira even laughed once when Elias made a joke about alien birds stealing his boots years ago. It wasn't loud laughter, but it was real. Suddenly, a sharp beep came from the sensor. Elias stood fast, gun in hand. Nira froze. watching him closely. He peeked outside the cave. Nothing. Only wind and dust. False alarm. She asked. Maybe? Elias said, but we move at dawn. Before sunrise, they left the cave, following a narrow trail between rocks. The sky turned orange as they reached the edge of a dried river. Beyond it lay a forest of metal trees. Old zone poisoned during the Ellerin-Human War. They would have to cross fast. Before the air turned thick, Elias handed Nira a small rebreather mask. She looked nervous but didn't complain. They held hands as they stepped into the metallic wasteland. Dead machines stood like statues, and the wind made them hum low like ghosts whispering. Halfway through, they heard a soft buzzing in the air. Drones. Elias pulled Nira behind a fallen cargo crate. 2 slaver drones flew above, scanning the area. With blue light, he held her close. Rifle aimed upward, the drones hovered. Searching, then turned away, fading into the fog. They didn't speak for an hour after that. Just walked in silence until the air cleared. Once they reached the other side, Nira finally whispered, "Will they always follow me?" "Maybe," Elias said truthfully, "but I'll always be between them and you." That night, they camped on a quiet cliffside. Below them, the lights of Newcastle finally blinked in the distance. Warm, steady, alive. It looked small, but to Nira, it was brighter than a star. "Is that it?" she asked, voice trembling. "That's it," Eli said. "Almost home." She didn't sleep that night. She sat beside Eli's, watching the lights, hugging her cloak around her. And when he finally dozed off, she whispered softly, "Please don't leave me when we get there." Elias, half asleep, replied without opening his eyes, "I won't," and she believed him. They reached the edge of Newcastle at noon the next day. The walls were high metal and stone welded together, covered in solar shields and sniper turrets. A watchtower rose above the gate, where 2 humans in armor aimed rifles as soon as Elias and Nira stepped out from the rocks. "Stop right there," a voice shouted, sharp and cold. Elias raised his hand slowly. "We're not here to fight," he called. The guards didn't lower their weapons. "What's in the cloak?" one of them asked. Nira stepped out from behind Elias, her hood still covering her face. She looked down. Her hands clenched tightly around her pendant. The guards exchanged glances, and one of them muttered something into a cum. A moment later, the heavy gate groaned open, revealing a tall woman in a black command jacket. She had a scar across her chin and eyes that missed nothing. "Elias Crow," she said, walking out. "I never thought I'd see you again." Elias gave a short nod. "Hello, Captain Risa." She looked at him, then at Nira. "And who is the girl?" "She's with me," Elias said firmly. Risa folded her arms. "Elias, you know the rules. Hybrids must be scanned, registered, and placed under protective watch." "She's not a weapon," Elias said. "She's a child. She's a target," Risa replied. "If the wrong people find out she's here, this whole place becomes a battleground." Nira stepped closer to Elias, her face pale. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I didn't bring her here to hide," he said. "I brought her here because her mother died saving her. She's been hunted across half the galaxy, and I've seen what she's been through." Risa looked again, this time softer. "She speaks." Nira lifted her head, her voice quiet but clear. "My name is Nira," she said. "I just want to be safe." For a long moment, there was silence. Then Risa sighed. "You'll vouch for her?" "With my life," Elias said without pause. Risa turned to the guards and motioned them to stand down. "Let them through," she ordered, "but keep eyes on them." The gates opened fully, and Elias led Nira inside. Newcastle was unlike anything Nira had seen before. It wasn't clean or fancy, but it was alive. People moved through narrow streets made of metal and stone. There were children laughing, merchants shouting, smells of cooking, food, and engine oil in the air. Humans, aliens, hybrids, they all lived here together. Nira clung to Elias's arm, eyes wide as she took it all in. There? Not scared of each other? She whispered. No, Elias said. That's what makes this place different. They were taken to a small medical station, where Nira was scanned gently by an old doctor who smiled at her and gave her a piece of fruit. Elias waited outside the room, tense, when she came out. She had a small bracelet on her wrist and ID tag. Showing she was under Elias's protection, she showed it to him silently, and he nodded. Later, Risa found them sitting on a bench near the community square. There's a room available in the eastern wing, she said. It's small, but quiet. Elias nodded. Thank you. Risa paused, then added, I hope you know what you're doing. Elias, he looked at Nira and said, I didn't at first, but now. I know exactly what I'm doing. That night, Nira sat on a real bed for the first time in her life. She traced the edges of her pendant. Staring at the ceiling above, Elias sat in a chair nearby, cleaning his gear. The room was warm. The walls? Solid outside, Newcaster glowed under dim security lights. Do you think she would have liked it here? Nira asked suddenly. Your mother? Elias asked. She nodded. I think she'd be proud of you. Elias said, You made it this far, even when no one else could. Nira smiled softly. Thank you. For not giving up on me. I never planned to, he said. She got up from the bed and walked over to him without a word. She wrapped her arms around his chest and rested her head against him. I'm glad you're here, she whispered. Elias hugged her back gently. So am I. Outside, Newcaster buzzed with quiet life, but inside that small room, something more powerful had begun to grow. Not just survival, not just protection, a bond stronger than blood. The sun rose slowly over Newcaster. It touched the rooftops with a soft golden light, warming the stone and metal of the quiet city. Inside the Eastern Wing housing block, Nira stood by the window, holding her pendant in one hand. She watched people walking below humans, aliens, children playing, guards greeting merchants. Elias sat behind her, drinking something hot from a metal cup. He watched her carefully. The way her shoulders were more relaxed now, the fear in her eyes had faded, not fully, but enough to let something new grow hope. They're not staring at me, Nira said quietly. No, Elias said, not here. She turned to him. Do they know what I am? Some of them might, he said, but in this place? People don't ask questions unless they mean to help. She nodded slowly. I like it here. Later that day, Risa visited their room, holding a folded coat and a datapad. Time to register her into the citizen book, she said. If you still want her to stay. Elias looked at Nira, who was watching quietly from the side. Of course, he said. She's not going anywhere. They walked to the administration hall together. Passing through quiet streets and shaded alleys, Nira held Elias's hand the whole time. When they reached the front desk, a man behind the glass looked up and smiled. Name? Asked. Nira, she said. Family name? He asked gently. She paused, unsure. Then she looked at Elias and whispered, Can I take his name? Elias blinked, surprised. He looked at her, and something heavy and soft filled his chest. If you want, he said. She turned back to the man. Voice clearer, Nira Crow. The man typed it in, then slid the registration card under the glass. Welcome to Newcaster, Nira Crow, he said with a kind smile as they walked back. Nira said nothing. She just looked at the small card in her hand. Over and over, like it was something magical, Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You did it, he said. She looked up. No, we did it, that evening. They visited the memorial garden near the center of the city. It was quiet, filled with glowing plants and floating light stones. People came there to remember those they had lost. Nira knelt near one of the white trees and placed her pendant in the soil beneath it. She whispered something soft, something Elias couldn't hear. Then she stood up and took a deep breath. "She's with the stars now," she said. "But I think she's watching." "I think so too," Elias said. "And I think she's proud." Back in their room, Nira placed the registration card. On her small shelf beside the bed, she curled under the blanket, quiet but not sad. Elias sat nearby as always, cleaning his rifle out of habit. After a while, she whispered, "Elias." He looked up. "Can I really stay?" He stood, walked to her bed, and sat down beside her. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Steady and warm. You can stay forever." He said, "You don't have to ask again." She didn't answer, but she smiled. Then, slowly, she reached for his arm and held it as she closed her eyes. That night, Elias stayed beside her. Watching the soft light from the hallway spill into the room, he remembered all the things he had lost, all the people who had vanished from his life. But now, here was someone he had saved, someone who needed him not as a soldier, not as a fighter, but simply as a human being with a heart still beating. Outside, the stars shone above Newcastle, cold and distant, but inside that little room, warmth filled every corner. A girl who had once walked through dust and fear now rested safely in a place called home. And a man who had sworn never to care again had found something worth living. For, not all heroes carry swords. Some just open their door to a child and whisper, "You can stay forever."